All right then, gamers, it's the final elite spec for us to cover. And I'll tell you what, I'm not going to say anything. Because look at what just happened. This isn't edited. This is real. You can be a pure fire wizard. The Ellie mains, you have finally got what you've been asking for all of these years. That's right, there's a Grandmaster trait that lets you pick one element. You can be a fire wizard. You can be a water wizard, a puddle wizard. You can be a dirt wizard. And of course, you can be a wind wizard if you want to. All of that and more is what's going to be going on here for the Evoker. We already know what's going on here, but look, that's definitely an explosive entrance for the Elite Spec. But before we get to that, we are going to have to go back a little bit in time and go for a deep dive into exactly what is going on here with the Evoker. So, as you can see here, the way this works is that you get to specialize baseline. So the normal mechanic is that you specialize in any given element that you like. So you can pick out of combat. You can't do this in combat. You can pick the fox, the otter for water, the hare for air, and of course, the toad for earth. Now, whichever one you specialize in is going to give you a special F5 ability that kind of gets your little familiar to do its attack, but also it's going to massively reduce the cooldown of your specialized element. And this is a bit of a theme for this elite spec. There was a lot of talk on the stream from the devs, how a lot of this stuff is still pretty experimental. I get the idea this one is one of the ones they still want to do some work on. And there's going to be some tweaks. They talked about tweaks to utility skills. They're not sure about the power level of some of the traits, right? So this one is a bit of a work in progress, okay? I know the Ellie mains are going to be like, oh, no, they hate us. Yeah, maybe they do, okay? Maybe they should. Maybe they don't, you know, they should do more. They should go further. It's possible. But anyway, that is the mechanic. And the cooldown is super low on your achievement, which is really exciting. You basically get fresh air-ish for any element you like. Because the cooldown of reattuning, we can go ahead and see it as we pick the fox here. So you can see there, oh, here we go, that whenever you go to water, look at that cooldown, right? In fire and then air, it's a 1.5 second cooldown to get back into fire. Now, first of all, straight up, that just makes this way easier to play. It's going to be a very easy spec to play inherently. Because of that, because that just makes the rotational element very, very easy. Just because of the way Elemental's mechanic works, you're not going to get locked out of an element. Has some pretty cool implications for healers as well. It means that one thing that Ellie healers kind of struggle with is if you get trapped outside of water, you're kind of limited in what you can do to support your team, you know, outside of utility skills and so on. So you'll be able to get back into water. You'll be able to reactivate various attunement bonuses very quickly, like Stoneheart, like Water Ripple, like Sunspot. They are going to be putting internal cooldowns on that to make sure it doesn't get too out of hand. So bear that in mind. But that is basically the general gist of it. But yeah, I think a really interesting approach there, just allowing you to specialize in that element depending on what familiar you pick. Now, you do have to commit to that. And this is something that is an interesting one. Like, the spec design is a little bit rigid, in my opinion, because a lot of the traits and even utility skills are kind of linked to the familiar. And the element you specialize in is also connected to that familiar. So you do get like funneled pretty hard down a certain path. But I do want to preface this again. I think this one is one that's quite likely to change a fair bit. They're kind of testing the waters with the general ideas on the mechanics. I think there's going to be a lot of tuning, but more on that later, to be honest. Let's actually talk about what is actually going to be going on here. So for each familiar, you're also going to have two F5 abilities. And the way it works is that you have a regular ability and then a mega ability, kind of an ultimate ability that is usable after you've used the basic ability 3 times. And you have a resource that you build up by using weapon skills that charges up your pet. And once you have 6 charges, you can use the basic ability. Then you do another 6 charges, you can use it again, and then you can do it again. And then eventually you build up to being able to use the Omega ability. And while you're in the your specialized element, you get 2 charges per ability that you use. Now, Bear in mind, auto attacks do not contribute to this, but again, and we'll be talking about kind of some of the things that they're thinking about tweaking. They may actually end up doing that. They've said that, yeah, okay, we might do that if we think it's necessary. Maybe it's like half a charge per auto attack or something like that. Like, the reason that it doesn't do it now is because they wanted to kind of keep parity between weapons that have different auto attack speeds, so you don't get like really funneled into one or two weapons depending on, like how powerful it can, and how quickly you can charge up your class mechanic. That's kind of the rationale there. So let's go ahead and look at exactly what is going on here. Yeah, you can see there the UI. That's the UI for it. Looks a little bit weird, a bit of a work in progress in my opinion, but you can see there we're just charging up the basic skill. And there you go. It will light up. Now it can be used, and that will send out a fireball. And, well, we've got a lot of abilities to go over. This is like the basic ability there for the Fox. It will send out a little fireball. It has a cool effect too. It has like a ramp style effect. So, it has a 10-second window to like combo with itself. So the first time you use it, it will apply 1 stack of burning. The second time you use it, it will be 2 stacks, and then 3. So if you can kind of like chain loads of weapon skills together and then send out your little Firefox fireball, then you're going to get a good chunk of burning, which is going to have a very obvious synergy with the ultimate ability for the Fox. So here's the Ignite. It just fires out a fireball. And then the Omega ability is Conflagrate. This is a really cool ability, some kind of Fire Mage vibes from World of Warcraft, actually, because it copies burning to nearby enemies. So you get a big damage here. The Fox like lunges in, does a big explosion, and then it transfers up to 9 burning stacks in AoE. Really, really cool effect. In my opinion. This is kind of the overall theme, by the way. So the basic attacks is like the familiar does something around you, basically. And then the ultimate attack, it kind of will lunge in and do something, at its location or kind of like very near to where it is. So you kind of have that dynamism there with what's going on there. Obviously not really much of a fundamental difference. It's like an RP difference, but pretty good. So here we go. We can see the Conflagration ability kind of get into the mix in just a moment. Pop the Conflagration. Boom! So it leaps in, does a big fire explosion, and of course there wasn't any burning on the target there, but as you can see, if there was, it would transfer that, it would copy that burning. And 9 stacks, I think they could actually be more generous with that in PvE, in my opinion, because it is only burning. Bear in mind, Epidemic is capable of copying every condition. To be fair, this doesn't require a utility skill commitment, but it does require you to commit your profession mechanics, so it's certainly not nothing. For sure, but again, balance is irrelevant at this stage. They'll obviously be changing things a whole bunch when we actually get to the game. But let's go ahead and continue. That's basically how the Firefox works. The Otter is unsurprisingly going to be support. So first up is just kind of like the basic attack. It's Splash. It just sends out healing projectiles to nearby allies. And then you have a really potent one here, actually. This one's super strong, in my opinion. What is it called? What is it called? It is the Buoyant Deluge. So the Otter throws a massive glob of water at the target. You get a massive heal of 4.5k. You get pulsing regeneration, 3 condis removed, and a 2-second stun on your enemies. So both things there, you can see the water goes out there. Big healing AoE, regeneration being applied. And of course, you can still then combo that with the other abilities, getting some good healing out as well onto your allies, but it also has that CC component, so it has an offensive component as well. So let's say you're playing a support in PvP, you can help set up offensive potential for your teammates by healing them and sustaining them while they're in a fight, but also landing a deadly CC ability to shut down your opponents and allow your team to take them down. Okay, and that's how that one works. And then we have the Hare, and this is going to be the kind of power damage oriented one. Like the Fox, obviously condi damage. The Hare is kind of your power damage familiar. So you have Zap, and this has a really cool effect, by the way. So the Hare creates a burst of lightning at target location, so it's kind of an AoE ability. And then it damages enemies and marks them. And enemies that are marked take 7% additional critical strike damage from you, with some very obvious synergies there with power builds, or indeed with fresh air style stuff, right? Where you're getting loads of crits, getting big damage, and then modifying that by 7%. So super, super good in any game mode. Obviously kind of promoting these critical strike-oriented burst builds, and then really synergizing with that, so you can like line up all of your bursts into it, like looking at Scepter abilities, Phoenix, Dragon's Tooth, right? Lightning Strike on air, all that kind of good stuff. And here is the ultimate move. This one I actually thought was... This is a really interesting one. So it's basically like Revenant Sword 3, essentially. You send the hair and it goes in, and then it lashes around at other targets. Doesn't look that impressive there, and I think maybe it could use a bit of a touch-up, to be honest. But again, numbers, right? They don't really have any relevant gear on right now. But I will tell you what, the power of abilities like this is always on a single target, right? So you can see there, you're going like, well, that is not that impressive. But look what happens when you go to an isolated target, right? So imagine you're landing your burst, right? You've got your zap on it, and then also all of those hits are going to land onto the target. And it goes over time. That's potentially going to force out dodges, making it like pretty expensive to mitigate all of that damage, then opening you up to further combos too. So yeah, okay. You can kind of see it there. I think we could maybe go a little bit harder on that. It, could maybe be a little bit flashier, maybe a bit more explosive, a bit more effects on it rather than just damage. But I think conceptually it is absolutely fine. And then finally we get to the actual good stuff, guys. We get to the actual good part of the class. The Toad. Look at him. He's floating in the air, wiggling his arms around, man. Like, that is what we like to see. We very much like to see this. And what is it going to do? So first up, and this is kind of it's a defensive CC-oriented little familiar. So you can see here it has a basic ability called Calcify. So it's going to do an AoE daze, and if you connect to that daze, or rather, if you get an interrupt with that daze, you get barrier. So just landing the CC isn't good enough. If you interrupt your opponent, then you are going to get barrier. That's only on one target. It's a 5-target daze, but you're only going to get that barrier once. And then, of course, once the Toad is fully charged up, here we go, you are then going to get the ultimate Toad move. And this one's also pretty damn powerful. So here we go. You can see the Toad is going to do a massive slam into the ground, apply some AoE protection, and also apply a bit like an effect like Guardian Hammer 5. So that's actually a rock wall. You can see that's persistent. And enemies will not be able to cross that unless they have stability. So you get like a big knockdown, you trap enemies in the frog wall, and they are then unable to escape. So you can, like, again, use that as kind of like a lockdown tool to do this. And this is kind of one of these things. Like, this is a weird me to talk about. And the elite skill helps out with that, and we'll look at that in a bit. But you are quite restricted with this, because, you're very committed to your familiar. I wonder if they're going to end up making it so you can pick 2 rather than just the 1. Somehow, I don't know how that would work, but, look, comparison is the thief of joy and all that, but if you look at other elite specs, they've kind of got a lot of toys to play with, right? And we're only getting 1 extra button here on Ellie, and that might be intentional because, again, like, Ellie has a spec that does have a good chunk of buttons attached to it, but, like, in a way, this is a very restrictive mechanic, and we'll kind of see how this ends up looking as well, especially when we get into the abilities and definitely the traits as well. It's an interesting one. I obviously don't want to give like full judgment until we've actually had a chance to play with it and see how it plays out. But you can see how this mechanic could be quite restrictive, because if you want this rock wall, you have to have the Toad. And that means you're not going to have access to the healing on the Otter. You're not going to have the damage, right, from the hare or the fox, right? You're very specifically tailoring in for this specific piece of utility. So more on that a little bit later, though, but that's kind of setting the scene. So now, utility skills. So the heal skill, just a very basic heal. It's a strong heal with a short cooldown, but it has a very nifty added bonus, and that added bonus is that it will instantly charge your familiar skill. So you basically get 6 charges immediately, and that is a potent effect, especially because you could use it to you could use your regular one and then immediately cycle into the ultimate, right? You could kind of chain it together there, use that as an additional recovery point. Again, say you've got the Otter, that's going to give you that big heal. You've got the Toad, it's going to give you that big CC and protection to help you stabilize, or give you the big damage from the conflagrate, all that kind of good stuff. Next up is kind of a interesting one, and I do want to kind of repeat this from what I said earlier. There was a lot of commentary from the developers how they kind of they feel that they probably want to go a little bit further with the utility skills and some of the parts of this elite specialization in particular, and that it may not be quite powerful enough, like effect-wise. So they're going to be keeping a really close eye on that. So definitely keep that in mind. But yeah, the theme for kind of some of these elemental themed utility skills, which is going to be the slot skills, there'll be a break stun if you have the appropriate pet. So basically, if you got the fire one and you got the fox, then it will be a stun break. If you got the otter, then it will be a stun break if on the water one. The hare will make the hare utility skill a stun break, and same thing with the toad as well. So first up is Fox's Fury. You give boons, Might and Fury, and you do more damage and burning depending on how much might you have. So 3 stacks if you're over 20 might of burning, 2 if you're between 10 to 20, and under 10 it's going to be 1 stack. And the same thing with the damage, basically doing double damage when you have over 20 might. Obviously in PvE, that's always going to be the case. So you're going to be getting that burning and also damage. And this is where things really start to get weird, right? Because it's super nice that's a stun break, but again, like you're going to be using this rotationally if you're playing a kind of DPS-oriented build. So it being a stun break is really weird, and that's where some of the design just get a little bit odd, in my opinion. To be honest, and this ability, let's be honest, it's not super exciting right off the bat there as well. Pretty cool animation, obviously, right? You got this kind of like cool fire graphic appearing around you, which is pretty nifty. And of course, you know, damage, might, and fury. I'm not going to complain too much about it, but again, LE utility skills have always been a little bit lame. Relying on core utility skills doesn't feel amazing to me. It's like you want to be able to package these in. The good news is that at least the otter one is actually kind of wacky. Actually, so check this one out. Otter's Compassion is what we have here, and this one is pretty juiced. It says, look, this is insane if you think about it. So it says, convert conditions on nearby allies into regeneration. If water is your specialized element, this skill breaks stuns. So this is insane, actually. So it removes 5 condies, and you get 5 stacks of regen, and you break stun. With a radius of 600. It doesn't break allies, but the radius of the removal is 5 of 600. So the thing is that does activate, this was confirmed on stream, that activates Cleansing Water 5 times. So this is a 10 condi removal on a 600 radius. Yeah. So basically a full cleanse of your team, which will then apply some regeneration too. So there's some tuning going on here. Very powerful effect. Obviously, we'll probably have a longer cooldown in PvP. As you can see, it is unique by game mode. But yeah, that's a good one. You know, we were complaining about LE utility skills. That's an insane one. AoE full cleanse. Love to see that. Hare's Agility is up next. Dash to a location while evading attacks. Your next few strikes create an arc of chain lightning. If air is your specialized element, this skill breaks stun. Now, obviously, this is very powerful. Again, some kind of like fresh air LE build or kind of brawlery build that's kind of focusing on power damage is going to get huge value out of this. 1, mitigation with the evade. Stun break potentially if you're going for the hair, so you're going for zap, you're going for that big power damage. And then also you have chain lightning as well. So in other words, you get 5, almost like a venom basically, and you're going to have like a power venom that's going to do some big chain lightning out to your opponents after that. So a very multi-purpose skill. Not the longest leap in the universe, but of course that's because it's got a lot loaded into the kit. So a nice bit of mobility, bit of disengage, and even an offensive tool for like hunting down an opponent potentially by leaping after them, so you can like finish them off alongside your trusty lightning hair. But of course, again, it's still good even if you don't have the hair, because like lightning flash is a pretty common ability to see pop up on elementalists, and that's pretty similar to this in a way. Obviously, a port is usually better because you can kind of teleport up terrain a lot of the time as opposed to leaping, but it's still good nonetheless. So yeah, this is a good skill just overall. And finally, the toad. So this toad is a meditation. Well, they're all meditations. Block incoming attacks, then strike nearby enemies with shattering rocks. Gain protection if the skill completes successfully. If earth is your specialized element, this skill breaks stun. So yeah, this is definitely a very potent defensive ability. You're getting protection here on yourself, doing a bit of damage, bit of bleeding. You got a block at the start of it as well, and then potentially breaking out of stun at the start of that as well. So you kind of break out of stun, you have a block, you're getting prop, doing a bit of damage. I feel like this is the kind of thing that, again, just need maybe just put a bit of barrier on this as well, because you got to bear in mind, guys, like skills have to be so good these days to be competitive, right? Like the game is in a very high power state, so classes need to be very powerful to survive. If you look at builds that typically do well, they're very overloaded. So yeah, there's been a lot of consistent buffing over the years. So I think this is kind of an okay skill though. Relatively long cooldown, 30 seconds. Not the worst thing in the world. But again, it is doing a fair bit, so it kind of makes sense. The Elite we've got to see. And I think the Elite does kind of help out some of the issues of the spec, because it basically gives you access to all of the familiars, right? All of them. You can see there, you get a big ability going off, and then you basically summon all of them to do their Omega ability at the same time. Now, what you'll notice is that they didn't summon the Firefox and the Airhead there. It's because there was no targets where it was selected. So it just did the Toad and the Otter. But you can see here, right, if we go over to some Golems, it's going to get all of them, right? So boom, the Toad's going to go in. And this is, you know, the combo here is very logical, by the way. So if we go back here, look what actually happens. The Toad is going to leap in. The Toad goes in. It lands a brutal CC, stunning the Golems. The Otter then charges up with a follow-up CC, which then CCs again with the bubble. And at the same time, you've got the Hare and the Fox unleashing at the same time. I love that. Really cool Elite skill. Looks fantastic. Look how exciting that is. Look at that. And, you know, that's a beast. That's a proper Elite skill right there, is that. You know, you put that in a team fight, you're going to be bringing the pain. Massive damage output. And, of course, some good sustain protection for your teammates, regen for your teammates, water field for your teammates. And, of course, powerful CC, both from the rock wall that will block people and also the knock, right? The knockdown and, of course, the bubble CC. So a lot going on. It's 3 CCs, essentially, packaged into that, including the, you know, the rock wall. So, yeah, to be honest, this is kind of what the spec needs, right? I think it kind of needs that extra bit of flexibility. It feels a little bit too rigid to me. You're very committed into, like, what you go for in general. And this is kind of giving it that needed flexibility. Obviously, cranked up to 11 with that, but yeah. I almost feel like there needs to be a utility skill, or maybe even, I don't know, it would be weird to add another F key, but I mean, they kind of did this with Untamed. We've already got a lot of F keys, but I feel like there almost needs to be like a way to temporarily get access to another familiar somehow. So that you can utilize a little bit of that versatility that you're going to want in some of these situations. I'm not sure. Maybe they can fix it with, they could go with traits there as well. That could also work. Or maybe just empowering a lot more of these abilities, like making the utility skills better, making the traits better. But at least the Elite skill is indeed pretty cool. Yeah, I get, yeah, the meditations could, you could have like one specialty, and then maybe when you use a meditation, you could make it inverse almost, like when you use the meditation, you have access to the Otter for like one cycle or something, or have access to the Otter for like one ability, just the F5, just the once, not the ultimate one, but just like the basic one maybe. I think there's a couple of possibilities here to add a little bit more flexibility to it. But anyway, perhaps some more ramblings on that at a future date. We have got to talk about traits. You guys already saw a little bit of a tease. We are, of course, getting the Fire Wizard. It was so funny to watch the Twitch chat when this is going on. Everyone was going berserk, spamming Fire Wizard, but we'll talk about that trait in a bit there. First of all, we have to talk about what's actually going on here. So, again, this is the evocation. This is going over exactly what the Elite spec is and how it works. You need to use 6 weapon skills to charge at your familiar, but you do get double value if you're matching. So if you've got the Firefox and use a fire ability, you get double charges, and you're specializing in that element. So you get a 1.5 second recharge time on your specialized achievement, which is very, very powerful, by the way. And that's why don't write the spec off yet. That effect on its own is extremely potent, especially if you combine it with fresh air. Because bear in mind, this lets you basically be fresh any element. You can be fresh water, fresh earth. So if you take fresh air with this, say you took, you know, fresh fire and fresh air, you can swap between those achievements like indefinitely all the time. You know, the same thing with like anything, right? You could do fire and water, you can go into water whenever you like, air and water, go into like water whenever you like, or air whenever you like, all that kind of stuff, right? It's a very interesting approach. And of course, it does potentially liberate you from playing fresh air. You could go for another trait within there. Because again, you can just get to air very easily. You almost don't need the trait, although of course the trait is still very powerful for damage output. Anyway, that is the deal. And here is the minor. Let's kind of go to the, I think it's best to go to the Imager album here. We can see exactly what's going on. So the minor master trait is Enhanced Potency. Improve a boon based on your familiar, and you can kind of see what the class wants you to do, or what the elite spec wants you to do. So the Fox, you get 10 extra condition damage from Might, so that is a significant boost to your condition damage, basically another 250 condi damage, while you've got the Fox, and you've got 25 Might. Regeneration is 20% better, while you have, if you've got the Otter. So in other words, that's a significant boon to your healing output, your passive healing output. Fury is 15% better if you have the Hare, so that's 40% extra crit as opposed to 25%. And look at this, Bunker Toad is here. 30% condition damage reduction on Prot. So basically Prot becomes Prot and Resolution combined. And if you can manage to give yourself Resolution, that of course will go up to 66% reduction. So you can be very resilient against conditions. Not a lot of Resolution access, to be honest. On Ellie, it's not the easiest thing to come by, but of course if someone else gives it to you, then that's another thing entirely. So you can become incredibly durable with the Toad, and that's going to be a bit of a theme, right? You are super tanky with the Toad, and well, kind of on that, Familiar's Prowess. Gain a temporary bonus after using a Familiar skill. So again, with the Fox, 25% condition damage. Familiar's Prowess for the Otter is 30% oh, well, actually, okay, hold on. Fake news. Basically, this is the version of the tooltip that's showing the Grandmaster trait. There's a Grandmaster trait that makes us even stronger. But yeah, this is in fact not the case. It's actually, I think, 15% base, 20% extra healing, 15% extra damage, and 10% damage reduction is the baseline. For now, but even that is still pretty good. Like 50% damage is really not to be sniffed at. I'm actually going to quickly check. Bases, yeah, it's 10%. Oh, actually, it's 10% damage. Don't mind, it's actually not as good as I expected. 10% extra condition damage, 15% healing increase to others, 10% strike damage on the Hare, and then the Toad still gets 15% incoming damage, but it doesn't get condition damage reduced. That's what actually changes. So when you have that Grandmaster, you get negative condition damage. As you can see, like a very significant enhancement to the values here. And well, yeah, look, I'll tell you what, if you want to do DPS, you're probably going to be all right here because we've got a very potent damage toolkit. You can go ahead and take Familiar's Focus for a little bit of healing when you pop a Familiar skill, but also 25% condi damage on the Fox. And then you're also getting 10% burning damage increase from Fiery Might. So, and you're also getting that extra condition damage when you've got Might from Enhanced Potency, which also synergizes super well with Fiery Might. So if you guys want to pump, I do have some good news for you. You can probably do that, and even better, you can be a fire wizard while doing it, like camping fire and just going crazy with your scepter or something. Anyway, so those are the adept traits, and now we can kind of move on. The minor traits, rather. Now we can talk about the adept traits, and I'm not the biggest fan of the design here. So here's the gist. We've got 4 traits that centralize around the familiars, right? So here, electrical enchantment, that's the Hare. Fiery Might is the Fox. Soothing evasion is the Otter, of course. And earthen fortification is the Toad. And well, you can probably see the problem here. The thing is that in my opinion, the trait design space is hampered pretty big time because of this, because you only have 9 traits in a spec, and we've got 4 of them committed to what familiar you want. They do something if you don't have the familiar, but yeah, it really wants you to lean into that they're significantly better if you do have the corresponding thing. And I think that is one of the reasons why I'm a little bit uncertain about this spec, is because it almost like doesn't have room to breathe. We don't have room for like proper boon support, for example, for a heal evoker, right? Like if we look at here's the quickness trait, Familiar's Blessing. Look, where are the other boons to allies, right? This is you. This is like Fury on you. This is Prot on you, right? Like this is, this is regen. This is regen on allies, I guess, like when you dodge roll on them and stuff like that, but we don't really have a lot of support here on these abilities here. And to be fair, excuse me, I do think this is a bit of a kind of PvP thing. I think that, I'm pretty sure CMC did this one. He's a PvP enjoyer, and I think that this is the type of spec that definitely can find some functionality there, because you don't necessarily need to care about like having AoE boon support. But I will admit, I was actually pretty excited for a support Evoker, and not just in PvE, in PvP and World versus World 2. And it's kind of in a weird spot. Like, if we look at some of these traits, by the way, don't get baited by the tooltips, right? Because you go, oh, that's a lot of stuff, right? Well, here's the thing. Only one of these applies. So when you actually kind of hide the stuff that doesn't do anything, right? Do you know what this looks a little bit like, guys? Yeah, it looks like the Paragon traits, to be honest. There's not a lot going on here. And again, we're living in modern Guild Wars 2. If your traits aren't pretty goddamn stacked, if they're not looking a little bit like amalgams, okay, then you're kind of out of luck to an extent. Like, it's funny. Like, I actually hate to criticize this because the thing is, I actually view this stuff as, like, very fair. Like, these traits are kind of... They would be good if the game wasn't like, you know, full crazy power creep mode, right? But because we're living in modern Guild Wars 2, like, I'm not sure this is enough, right? Like, just the design. It's not even the numbers, right? Like, if you want to compete in modern Guild Wars 2, you got to have boons and stuff like that, like, coming out your ass. And I'm not sure if we're at that element yet. Of course, you know, there might have been some caution here about, say, interactions with the arcane trait line, which means whenever you attune, you're going to give boons. So, you know, you can give loads of prot with elemental attunement, right, and rotate around. And there might be some caution there because of that, and kind of wanting to get a good feel of, like, where things land and then potentially tuning things later on. But I think my concerns do go a little bit deeper than that. Like, especially because these traits are also mediocre. We have the kind of middle adept trait that is kind of neutral to what, like, familiar you have. But look at this. Burn enemies. 1 stack of burning and grant regeneration to nearby allies when you use a heal skill? Huh? In 2025? 1 stack of burning, regen, 240 radius. And you commit a full trait to that. That's tough. And kind of the same with elemental balance, right? Increased outgoing strike damage and reduced incoming strike damage when above the health threshold. Outgoing strike damage is further increased. When below the health threshold, incoming strike damage is further reduced. And again, not the worst trait, but I feel like that's minor trait, right? That's like, we combine that with this one or something. I don't know, like this on its own, like having to commit a full trait to that. Ooh, I don't know, man. That's kind of tough. At this stage, and I kind of feel about quite a lot of these specs. The only thing I don't feel about committing about, guys, is this. Okay, oh yeah, log in. Look at that UI. That's beautiful. They've been dreaming. Look, Ellie mains have been dreaming about this for years, including me. Look at that. Doesn't matter what F skill you press, guys. F1, F2, F3. It's fire, fire, fire. It's the way it needs to be. To clarify, by the way, this actually prevents you from leaving. You can't actually just, like, you can't go. It would be funny if you could, like, swap to F2 and it was another fire achievement and it almost gave you, like, 4 fire achievements, but that's not how it works, but it is pretty funny. That was, but I kind of want to talk about these traits, you know, a little bit too. So let's actually get down to this. We kind of did like the overall design concerns there, but let's talk about the actual traits themselves. So after use of familiar skill, again, that's the F5, your next strike creates an arc of chain lightning. Gain additional strikes of chain lightning if you have the hair. So you get 2 stacks if you have this. It's twice as effective with the hair, and you're getting a little bit of fury as well. And yeah, okay, I don't hate the effect whatsoever, but again, I don't find it particularly, you know, the design that I've been really excited about in some of these specs is that they're very gameplay warping, right? Like, they really change how your spec mechanic works. They really change your thought process when approaching it, or like really gives you a new ability, right? Something like that. This isn't it. And neither is Earthen Fortification. Game prop when you disable an enemy. Protection duration is increased if you have the Toad. So, you know, I actually, you know, I think this is actually a fine trait, to be fair. Even if you don't have the Toad, this is honestly pretty decent in comparative, right? Because, you know, Ellie has a lot of CC and a lot of its kit. So if you land a CC, get a bit of prot, have some defensive potential. And if you have the Toad, you have more. But the thing is, if you're playing this type of build, like, I feel like you're so pigeonholed depending on, like, where you go with this. Because if you take the Toad, that really is going to interfere with your damage potential, right? Because that means you're not going to have the Fox or the Hare, and that's problematic, right? And that means you're going to end up being very, very defensive, like very, very bunkery. And maybe that's fine. Maybe some kind of like brawler build could go with that. But yeah, it's quite restrictive because of how I do feel like your familiar abilities are pretty important. So you really want to have the ones, you almost want to have more than one, right? But you can't. Next up are some good news. Fiery Might. This is a beast of a trait. That is the good news. So a little bit all over the place, I guess you could say. Burning you inflict does increase damage, 10%, really nice. And this is the big one. This one's so strong. Gain might when you inflict burning. And of course, you have oodles of ways to do this on a whole bunch of different weapons. On Scepter, right, is the big one. On Sword is another one. And if you have the Fox, that duration is doubled. So you can just give yourself 25 might very easily with this, which is obviously a very potent effect. You can get some pretty serious damage. Even without the Fox, you're going to get a lot of might. You could potentially even share it to nearby allies with the fire trait line. You've got Pyromancer's Puissance, right, which is going to be pretty powerful. And obviously, might in general is good. Of course, if you've got the Fox, it's also giving you extra condition damage, so you're burning people even harder. This does work with Inferno, by the way, and the devs have stated that they are looking for a way to make this enhanced potency work with Inferno. So, quick recap. Inferno is a fire trait that basically says your burning scales with power instead of condition damage. This will work out of the box, right, because it gives 10% damage to burning, and so will Familiar's Prowess, because that's just condition damage, so it modifies your burning damage directly. But this one obviously won't, because it's giving you condition damage, which essentially is useless, right, if you have Inferno. So that will end up getting fixed or changed, so be aware of that. But yeah, just a very good trait, like very good for giving yourself might, good for pumping, big damage. And yeah, like there is one build that I can see immediately there's actually a build known as Fire Wizard. It's basically Scepter Focus Fire Camping Ellie. If you like doing that, good news. You can 100% do that with the Evoker. And I think that will probably be a pretty powerful and significant buff to that build. I believe it basically plays core Ellie now, or potentially Tempest. But good news, Evoker is here for you with some extra condition damage modifiers and even a little bit of self-stacking might as well. So Fire Wizards, rejoice. This spec is for you. And I think, you know, okay, memes aside, the Fire Wizard will actually get a lot powerful from this, because it means you can swap to other attunements and not get punished for it. So let's say you're pressured on your Fire Wizard. You can go to Water, boom. Water Trident, big self-heal. Go to Earth, give yourself Resistance and Barrier with the Rock Shield. Boom, love it. Okay, use Obsidian Flesh as well, right? Because you've got Focus, right? You can swap over to that. Okay, nice. So it actually does give you some really nice synergy there with a couple of builds in PvE that are going to allow you to have a lot of flexibility without getting completely locked out of your fire element, right? So you kind of have that purity of purpose, right? You can be super, super flexible and also have, I think, will be quite a lot of damage, actually, with what this can deliver to the table. So that's, you know, that's pretty good. And then we have the support trait here is going to be Soothing Evasion. Grant regeneration to nearby allies when you dodge. Heal allies when you grant them regeneration. Healing is increased if you have the Otter. So again, this is actually a pretty damn decent effect because you can spam a bunch of regeneration. We saw also loads of regeneration sources and individual procs with the Otter utility skill with the Condi removal, which can potentially apply 5 stacks of regeneration, which would then activate this trait 5 times. Bear in mind, these numbers are without healing power, and they don't include healing modifiers, which we are going to have a lot of. We have, of course, 15% baseline after we use a familiar skill with the Otter from Familiar's Prowess, but you also might have the Water trait line for 20%. You might have Relic, you're going to have Food, you can have Sigils, right? So this will end up actually healing a lot. But, okay, what's the elephant in the room here, guys? Where are the boons? Are they... Is it behind me? No, that's Soothing Evasion. Yeah. This is obviously... I see the skeleton of a really cool support-oriented build. I think it's really cool. The Otter sending in the Orb of CC. Being able to get back to water. It's such a cool mechanic, actually, for heal Ellie in every game mode, right? You can use your utility. You know, the same thing we just talked about for the Fire Wizard, right? It's the same for Water Wizard, for Puddle Wizard. You want to be able to get back to water to heal your allies, to say, let's use Geyser, use Cleansing Rain, to use Dagger Offhand, like Cone of Cold, right, to support your allies. Warhorn abilities, right? You want to be able to get back there. And this profession, this spec, provides the perfect solution to that. It allows you to have that flexibility, leap into Earth for Magnetic Aura and stability, go to Fire to evade, right, in stuff with Burning Retreat, give Might with Warhorn, right, use your blinds and resistance and Magnetic Aura on Warhorn. So I hope I'm kind of painting a slightly more optimistic picture here, is that there's some potential here, but we just need to actually give this thing a proper support core. It needs some more boon access if it wants to function as a support, I think. It can be supplemented with the Arcane trait line, but I'm not confident that's going to be enough on its own. As of right now, especially because the boon radius on Arcane is fairly mediocre, and there's not a lot we can do with utility skills. This is obviously going to be fantastic for support, but a lot of this other stuff is going to be lacking, I think. You know, we don't have Wash the Pain Away that we would have on a Tempest. We don't have Feel the Burn or the Super Speed, Eye of the Storm, Aftershock. These are amazing, highly power crept support utilities that the kind of go-to heal elementalist has. And look at Catalyst, hell, even heal Catalyst, right? You've got boons coming out your ass with both the traits and indeed the Jade Sphere itself, right? This is like a really key component of where kind of the game is at, and I feel like we're lacking that here. But I do want to emphasize there's a lot of potential for this to actually be interesting, again, because of how cool this elemental first on the charm, okay, the elemental specialization thing is. Being able to get back to water achievement or get back to your pure damage achievement is a big deal, but we need to see a bit more, meat on the bones here, in my opinion, and potentially a bit of a look at the profession mechanic overall. Let's go ahead and go to the Grandmasters. We've already talked about these a little bit, so we don't need to go over the ground again too much. So Familiar's prowess is improved. Heal yourself and use a familiar skill, so a bit of self-sustain there, and of course you get a really powerful buff. Very notably, we're getting double the healing bonus on the Otter, over double the condition damage bonus, and over double the damage on strike damage from the hair. So this is a significant output improvement. And if you just want to ruin people's day and kind of live out the days of Water Weaver when you could unironically 1v4 on Bunker Weaver, good news. Maybe Bunker Toad is actually going to be your solution here. Maybe you slap on Relic of the Zephyrite for AoE prot and resolution or something like that. You've got negative 15% incoming condition damage, negative 15% incoming condition damage, and then you've also got prot giving you 33% incoming power and Condi, and then maybe resolution 2 from your Zephyrite relic, and all of a sudden you're taking like, I don't know, like 10% damage from what you should. Maybe you got some Frost Aura as well, making it even more degen, and goodness me, you're gonna be immortal. The Toad protects. The Toad has got your back. If you go with Familiar's Focus, it certainly does. Anyway, I also want to point out, look at that icon. How can you not want to pick that, guys? Look at the Toad. Beautiful. Anyway, that is the deal with Familiar's Focus. And next up is going to be Familiar's Blessing. And we kind of went over this one a little bit before. This is your boon trait. So the prospective roles are going to be Alack, Heal, Otter, Mancer, and Quick Power DPS, Hair Mancer is what it's going to be. And then, of course, the Toad is going to be AoE Prot, and the Fox is going to give you... Guys, just remember... Like, I can't actually, hold on, let me try it. Look, this is very important for you to understand. Like, if you only have the, I can't do this, I don't think. If you only have, I'll use my body to do it. If you only have the Fox, that alacrity doesn't exist. The quickness doesn't exist, neither does the prot. This is a Grandmaster trait that says, when you use a familiar skill, you give 2 stacks of might in a 300 radius and remove 2 conditions. Now, I'll tell you what, removing 2 conditions ain't bad. But this is a Grandmaster trait. It needs to be pretty big, right? And more importantly, I think that, to be a little bit serious, I feel like these aren't warping enough as well to gameplay. I've been really impressed with Elite Spec design. and how the traits are super impactful and every decision like changes how your class plays. This really doesn't, right? Like, not only is it not super strong, I think, and doesn't synergize super well with kind of like how we want it to play out, it's also not super interesting either, which I think is not ideal. Again, 2 cons removed, like, you know, we don't hate that. Bear in mind, this is a fairly frequent ability, right? We only need to do 6 spells to cast that, and we're going to be able to repeat this fairly frequently. And yeah, we can definitely upkeep Alacrity and Quickness if we want to. But look, I actually think a really good comparison here is actually to Catalyst, another LE spec, right? So if you play Power DPS, Hairmancer, you give Quickness. If you play Catalyst, you do a billion DPS, and you also have access to Quickness, Might, Fury, Prot, and honestly, basically everything. You pretty much give all the boons on a QDBS Catalyst. Like, what? This is weird. I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm not the biggest fan of classes giving that many boons and being able to upkeep them so effectively, but I mean, I don't know, like, this is tough, right? And of course, the same is true for the healer. The healer is going to be able to bring Alacrity to the table. It will probably be Vigor or something in competitive, because, you know, with that's illegal, guys. But yeah, it's like, oh man, like we can do regen, we can do Alac, right? That's not quite enough. These traits need to get juiced up a fair bit, I think. And of course, we do actually have specialized elements here, which, look, come on, it's worth it just for this. But let's actually talk about this trait, because it's, you know, it's actually going to make it to the game, so we've got to talk about it. So you cannot leave your selected achievement. Your Familiar's basic skill charges more quickly. Activating your Familiar's empowered skill recharges your weapon skills and triggers traits as if you entered the attunement. So let's actually kind of decompile that. What does that mean? So you only need 4 spells to cast your Familiar ability, or, well, 2, in fact, because you're always, you know, you're always in fire, right? Because it charges, like, super fast, right? So you're always going to be able to go super speed, right? So 2 spells to use it. And that means every 6 spells, you're going to get your ultimate move, basically. Or have access to your ultimate move. Oh. Wait, am I cooked? Use it 3 times, then it flips over. Yeah, okay. So 6 spells to get the ultimate. And that reduces the recharge time of all of your weapon spells by 10 seconds and gives you attunement effects like Sunspot or Water Ripple, right? Whatever, right? Whatever you got going for you, depending on what trait lines that you have taken. Not sure if that counts as a weapon swap, by the way. I did not have time to ask the devs, unfortunately, if that is going to be the case. I would almost assume no, which is... Okay, this is weird, because this is like a true kind of meme trait. No, it must do. It must trigger weapon swaps. Otherwise, you literally don't... Your sigils do nothing if it doesn't. No, it has to be. No, it has to be. Now, okay, real talk. This is, in my opinion, maybe extremely weak. Because, yeah, I know people want to be a fire wizard, but Ellie is basically balanced around the fact that you have all these attunements. And... can there be some kind of like super crazy, maybe giga fire nuker build with, say, spear or staff in World versus World, and you're like going crazy with lava fonts and meteor showers and just like cycling through it and like doing big damage, all that kind of stuff? Bear in mind that's kind of weird because you're taking the Fox for that, and therefore you're kind of Condi focused, but maybe you want to play power and spam meteor shower, and it's kind of weird. I can't really see this happening with water because you really want the utility on a support build with the other specs. I mean, I don't know about that one either. Like, it's kind of weird, okay? Listen. Hi, Thief Mains. You know how you guys were really mad and you were like, Antichrist an April Fool's joke? This is what an April Fool's joke looks like, in trait form. Is it funny? Yes. Is it basically a weird, scuffed Grandmaster that's going to be a total meme in its current form? Also, yes. Now, don't get me wrong. I actually really respect the creativity here because this is, again, look, hey, I wanted stuff that was game warping, right? Here it is. This completely, fundamentally breaks Elementalist's class mechanic. Uh, but I'm not sure if it's actually very good. And, by the way, to be fair, the devs did recognize that. They said that this was a trait that they're really going to look at and kind of try to make it actually potentially good. But they are also, concerned that right now it might not be very good because it turns out giving up 15 skills, it's pretty expensive, and the recharge time reduction is obviously nice, and being able to spam your familiar spell is obviously nice, but I'm just not sure what kind of build you would run this on. I think that there is some potential again in PvE for some kind of DPS build that would opt to use this and just like cycles through, say, scepter abilities incredibly quickly to do like massive condition damage. Over time, again, kind of like maybe a scepter focus kind of approach, something like that. And but I'm just not sure if it would definitely be a damage build. Like, you're not going to make a support build that works in a meaningful way, I think. No, of course, no, definitely not. With this trait. So it'd have to be some kind of DPS build. And I don't think you could do it with... Like, you couldn't really do it with air super well. Is there any weapon that you could do this with air? I don't think so. Because, like, a lot of the air builds are kind of very oriented around fresh air to do damage. And obviously, like, fresh air doesn't exist in this universe, right? Like, you don't have a swamp. Yeah, maybe. Yeah, I actually heard, this is a suggestion we were talking about. This would be cool. This would be super cool. If Ellie got weapon swap with this, that could be interesting. So you give up your element swap, but you get to use 2 weapon sets with your 1 element. Now, I think it would still really struggle to do anything except damage, because again, heal Ellie builds are so focused around they're so focused around like using the utility, and then like your healing throughput comes from water and that kind of stuff. But I could imagine that kind of getting there. Like, if, you know, I could see some kind of DPS operation being utilized if you're able to. And also bear in mind that enhances the power of this, because this thing is all about recharging your weapon skills. So you could use this to basically recharge all of your weapon skills. I'm not sure if that's how it works. I think it actually doesn't work like that code-wise. It would probably only recharge the weapon skills that are currently on your bar, but I'm pretty sure they could actually make it work for both if they wanted to. So that could be potentially some kind of approach with what they could do for specialized elements there. But yeah, I think that kind of covers it there. Yeah, a really peculiar one. I do think we need to see... This one, to me, might be the one that I think needs the most changes. It's this one and Luminary that I'm hoping gets changed a fair bit. All the others I'm actually feeling really good about, or pretty positive about. You know, I think Paragon needs a bit of work too. But everything outside of that is feeling really good. But I do want to underline there is a lot of potential here. I think the mechanic is fun and cool. I think the RP is really cool. The elite skill is really nice. And there's some big potential in here, I think, for like just the base mechanic alone of having that cooldown reduction on your primary achievement is a huge deal and definitely changes up the class. But I think it's going to need a little bit more help to kind of find its way in the game. Certainly outside of PvP. Like, as it is right now, like, maybe it can work in PvP. We'll have to obviously see the beta there. But yeah, super interesting one there with the Evoker. Embrace the toad, my friends. And, well, whew, that is it. I'm honestly going to miss these guys. You know, I'm going to miss the... We didn't even get to see Roy on these streams. An absolute crime. But yeah, that is going to conclude the final review for the Elite Specialization reveals and deep dives for Visions of Eternity. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope you guys enjoyed the show. There is going to be a tier list coming. If you seriously think, just because we've got no more Elite Specs to review, I'm not going to be giving you guys a massive turbo serving of slop, it's like you don't know me at all. Okay, there's going to be a lot more slop incoming, guys, about the Elite Specs, about the expansion, about a billion other things. Okay, maybe Zero to Hero comes back. Okay, maybe we do some expansion preparation. I'm sure you guys would like that. Okay, we'll prepare for the expansion together. Okay, by buying gold with gems, so we have infinite money. Okay, I wish I had a referral link for that, but I do have one for the game, so you should use it. Buy Visions of Eternity now. Get your pet Toad. Okay, just don't read the traits or look at the utility skills. Just look at the Toad, and everything is going to be all right. But yeah, real talk, what do we think about this one? Like, how are we feeling? Like, do you agree with me? We've got some potential here. Do we think we need some pretty major changes? Do we think it just needs a couple of tweaks? I don't know. You guys let me know in the comments. Like the video, subscribe, watch the stream on YouTube and on Twitch, of course. Okay, follow all the social media, join everywhere, watch all the other videos, subscribe, bring the bell notification from wherever. And yeah, that's it. Final Elite Spec review is complete. Thanks very much for watching, gamers. I'll see you in the next one.